Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Cup of Coffee. I am Jake Brown here with Duncan Irvine, and let's go over the very chaotic week that was the Pacific Northwest sports. And to kick off this chaos, let's start off with the Seattle Seahawks. Oh my, what a game!
There's a lot you can say about this one. Not really sure if you have anything you want to start with, but it was Russell Wilson is back for better or for worse.
Well, he was bad. Seahawks lost 17 zip in Green Bay, and you can continue the Russell Wilson cannot uh, win in Green Bay as DK and Tyler Lockett only failed to reach 30 yards, and Russell Wilson looked awful. 19 for 39, 165 yards, and two interceptions, one of them in the end zone.
I think they both were actually.
Both were in the end zone.
Yeah,
But the good thing is Jamal Adams had an interception
finally.
finally
So that's something to build
versus
off of, I
Seahawks
guess.
uniform.
Yeah, there was
But
not much to pull from this game.
what can you say about the Seahawks defense though? Do you think it was the Seahawks defense excelling, or do you think it was Aaron Rodgers and the Packers just playing horribly?
Honestly, I think it was the Seahawks defense did not look bad. I think finally now they've had some time to kind of gel and figure it out. Obviously, they were on pace to break all type of records in a bad way earlier this season. And they've kind of been playing a little bit better. Obviously, the safety duo, one of the best in the league. I think you've seen a little bit better play from the linebackers and corners. Now that Trey Flowers is off the roster, you have two guys who don't feel like are going to give up a 70-yard touchdown every single play. There's still a lot they can build off of, though. But I think this is a good sign going forward.
Yeah, and I texted you during the game that Ryan Neal is probably the most underappreciated
Mm-hmm.
player on that defense, and he really excelled last game. I think he had an interception that game too. Am I correct?
I have to go back and check. It's been, like, as you said, a very chaotic week inside Pacific Northwest sports and outside of it. But that sounds right. And they really just need to keep finding ways to get him on the field because he's most of the time one of the better players on the field at any given moment for this defense. So it does make sense to me when you see him consistently not out there. So I think they need to keep finding ways to get him involved.
But Pete Carroll is saying that he wants to get Trey Brown out there more, and he was one of three Seahawks defenders who had a PFF grade over 80. That was Jordan Brooks, Ryan Neal, and Trey Brown. So guys who the Seahawks defense really need to step up, and it's looking good. Especially, I'm really excited for Brooks. It just seems like he
I was
gets
gonna
better
say
every game.
his performance definitely was something that stood out to me because we've kind of been crapping on him for a while because you got big shoes to fill when you're stepping up for KJ Wright. I think start of the year was obviously a little bit more rough, but he's definitely matured a little bit. And seems to be doing better at least.
I did see a tweet earlier, I think yesterday, that Brooks called KJ to help find some kind of how did he wanted to know how
Mm-hmm.
to defend screen passes better, and who better to ask than KJ
KJ
Wright.
Wright. Yeah, I
So,
mean that's you can see it on the field. He seems to be something seems to have clicked for him.
and finally, now we just need that offense to click, and hopefully it can be better when the Seahawks are at home against the Arizona Cardinals. Uh, who knows if Kyler Murray and D Hop are going to play? That's still up in the air. I think they're going to be able to play, but it's still a NFC West in-game division games are always a toss-up. You never know what's going to happen,
Mm.
especially last week when the Niners just blew out the Rams.
Yeah, that was definitely caught a lot of people off guard.
Yep. But anyway, let's move on to the Portland Trailblazers. This week, they beat the Houston Rockets 104-92 and came back against the Bulls 112-107. Duncan, why don't you take this one away?
So yeah, going back to the Rockets game, the Rockets are going to be one of the worst teams possibly of all time this year. So you need to beat them. They did that. They won by 12 points. I don't think you can really draw much from that game, but they looked really good against the Bulls last night. Damian Lillard didn't even have that great a game. He scored 22, which is, fine, kind of about average for him, a little bit below. But finally, I've been talking about this all year. Norm Powell stepped up. He had 18 points. Robert Covington had 10 points, and Larry Nance Jr. had 16. So those are kind of the three big acquisitions they picked up in the past couple of years that they thought were going to take them to that next level, and they just haven't been standing out so far. But this was one of the first times I can really remember all three of these guys kind of connecting at the same time. And obviously saw it. They came back from down 20, outscored the Bulls by 9 in the fourth quarter. And it resulted in a win against what's one of the best teams in the league this year.
Yeah, and I also highlighted when I was writing the script for the week that no one really looked great in the Houston Rockets game. Dame only had 20 points. The guy who really stood out for me in that game was Nasir Little, who had a double-double, 13 points, 14 rebounds. And they need guys like that to step up.
Yep. Just kind of the little guys getting, because you're going to get from Dame, you're going to get from CJ. It's kind of, this team will go as far as everybody else goes.
Yes. And we had a lot of big news for the Seattle Mariners this week. We had a huge coaching staff rebuild. We have Andy McKay and Christopher Negron promoted to the MLB staff. Christopher Negron was the Tacoma Rainiers manager. He is also a former Mariners player. Jarrett DeHart promoted to director of hitting strategy, and Tony Amarich to hitting coach. Everyone else except hitting coach Tim Laker and bench coach Jared Sandberg were brought back to the M's, and they still have a bench coach spot open. Like you said, Duncan, in the notes, that I don't really know much about these guys either, except for Christopher Negron, but it just
is
is
interesting
weird to me
though.
that,
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't feel like coaching was their issue last year, so it just seems like a strange time to let some of these guys go.
yeah. But the Arizona Fall League guys, the AFL Fall Stars game was last week. Right fielder Zach DeLoach, pitcher Travis Kuhn, and pitcher Devin Stewart, or Devin Sweet, my bad, representing the Mariners in the AFL Fall Stars game. Sweet was the one who impressed me the most by striking out both batters he faced. Travis Kuhn got a ground out, and Zach DeLoach went 0 for 2. I don't really know much about these guys either, except I have heard about Devin Sweet and Zach DeLoach before. Do you have any insight on these guys?
No, I can't really offer much more than what you said, but I think it is something to note that these guys represent, like you said, they're not really the name brand guys, but they're still playing well. So the Mariners' future is bright because you've got guys like Julio Rodriguez and these other big name prospects, and then on top of that, you've got a really deep farm system too.
Yeah, I think it just proves that the Mariners, like you said, have a really bright future, and that's what really important about this young core coming up, because they still have a really good amount of veterans coming up, because Mitch Haniger has kind of filled in this role of being the leader that Kyle Seager's leaving behind.
It's still so weird to me. I remember he was kind of a young gun up and coming a couple of years ago, and now he's already like one of the longest tenured players on the entire team. It's been fun
so
seeing his
weird,
rise
right?
to.
And now Marco Gonzalez is like the longest member of the pitching staff, and it's only been like 3 years, 2.5, 3 years. But we did talk about Mariners coaching. Let's talk about their manager, Scott Servais, who, in my opinion, he got robbed. And I wrote like a lengthy blog post on my website. It's jakeontheradio.weebly.com. And it just kind of blew my mind.
See, I agree with you. Obviously, I'm a little bit of a Homer fan, but I think Kevin Cash winning, like, it's fine. It's the safe pick, but to me, it's just so boring. And you're trying to make baseball more fun. And yeah, you can give it to the team with the $70 million payroll who won 105 games or whatever it was. But it really just doesn't make sense. When you really want to talk about who manager of the year was, getting down to the nitty gritty, I don't think you can make an argument that really anybody made better managerial decisions in late game, in clutch game when it's tied in the bottom of the ninth or whatnot than Scott Servais. He seemed to make the right moves at all the right times.
Yeah, and a stat to point out is that Scott Servais out managed Kevin Cash. There's a 6-1 record this year against the Rays for the Mariners. And while I agree that Kevin Cash is a safe pick, I still think he is a great manager. Scott Servais had the Mariners were projected to be way below 500. I think 72 wins was what I had at least preseason. And then they go out and win 90 games. And it's
Yeah,
holy cow,
he
how
would
is
be a
this
very
man not
rich
manager
man.
of the year?
Exactly.
They did the same thing to Gabe Kapler. Everyone thought, oh, Gabe Kapler, terrible manager in Philadelphia. The San Francisco Giants are going to be really bad. And then they go on and have the best record in the league, 108 games. And not even Dave Roberts was a choice for manager of the year. So
yeah, it's just
sense to me.
West Coast bias. I'll go with that as my excuse.
We're saying West Coast bias, but Gabe Kapler won.
That's true. Yeah. So it only goes so far, but
I say it's East Coast. I think there's a lot of East Coast bias because there was a lot of if Aaron Boone was nominated, I would have thrown.
Oh my gosh,
I would have.
It would have been insufferable.
That would have been, yeah, like you said, insufferable. But let's move on to college. We're going to start off with football, and there is no exciting game in the Pac-12 other than University of Washington against Arizona State. I was happy with the outcome for obvious reasons, because I do not shy away from my ASU fandom. But University of Washington, they led almost the entire game and lost 35 to 30. And when I say they led almost the entire game, I mean ASU had the lead for not even a minute minute and a half.
Yeah, it's pretty representative of what I think Jimmy Lake has done so far, which is basically just failed to live up to expectations. Obviously, we were texting, and I was like, "Dang, Washington's really got to pull this off." You're like, "Oh, just hold on," and I kind of overestimated them. I'd already typed out my circle of suck in the Pac-12, given that Washington was going to beat Arizona State. Fortunately, once they didn't, you were able to go back and rework it, so we still ended up figuring that out. But it blew my mind that they were not able to hold on to this.
Yeah, and I had to rework the circle of suck. I think you accidentally it accidentally autocorrected to circle of duck, which in this context still makes sense because it does start off with Oregon and ends with Oregon. I'll find it in a second, but I think one thing that I think kind of is the takeaway to this is that Jimmy Lake is not 100% the problem because he didn't coach this game. It was an interim coach, and the offense looked better. Dylan Morris looked better.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
not much to live up. Not much to live up, but and I want to correct myself. Trey Brown only had a 73.7 PFF grade. It was Jamal Adams who had a 79.6. I do want to correct myself as I'm going through all of the screenshots that you and I send each other. Anyway, I just think the defense though for Washington just looked absolutely awful.
Yeah, like you said, they were kind of leading the whole game, and your offense can only do so much, and 30 points, especially in the Pac-12, is usually enough to stay competitive, which they were, but you just gotta close out. There's really no other way to say it than that.
All right, and I found the circle, what you said, the circle of suck that got auto-corrected to circle of duck. Again, still makes sense. Oregon lost to Stanford, who lost to Washington, who lost to ASU, who lost to WSU, who lost to Cal, who lost to Arizona, who lost to Colorado, who lost to USC, who lost to Utah, who lost to Oregon State, who lost to UCLA, who lost to Oregon.
Pac-12 is down bad this year.
Yeah. I mean, there's a reason why people say that they shouldn't be a Power Five conference. But continuing on with Washington for a second, when I was watching, Sam Huard, Brock Huard's nephew, got a few snaps last game. And I was like, man, I'm more impressed with Sam Huard than I am with Dylan Morris, and he only had 5 attempts.
Yeah, I mean, I've been saying it, I think, since our very first show. It's kind of surprised me they haven't given him a little bit more time, especially we can talk about Jimmy Lake in a minute, but he's really had nothing to lose. I don't see why you wouldn't throw him out there and let him play a little bit more.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I don't know what I don't know if it's a seniority thing or if because Sam Huard comes from a legacy family like Brock Huard, and you have his Sam Huard's father. I'm blanking on his name. Was also a quarterback at Washington before his brother Brock.
Mhm.
So I actually texted my parents and said, Sam Huard, Brock Huard's nephew, is getting snaps. And my mom replied, man, I'm old. Anyway, but yeah, Jimmy Lake got canned just a few days after, not even a few days after Washington's loss to Arizona State. And it was kind of just coming a mile, like it was just in the rearview mirror.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to talk. There was rumors last week, and he said he wanted to hold off until anything got made official. And what do you know? Is like 3 days later, he does end up getting fired. I don't think this comes as a surprise to anybody. Gets in trouble for shoving a player. 5 anonymous players cited similar incidents. That usually alone would be enough to get a coach fired. But considering the on the field product has not been good either, it's just time for him to go. He's really just kind of been a PR nightmare for them this year.
He did have a winning record with Washington, though, which is insane. 7-6 career with University of Washington as a coach, as a head coach. And now he doesn't have a job. But moving on to another chaotic organization, Oregon staves off Washington State 38-24. It was back and forth in the half. Oregon scored 2 touchdowns in the first quarter. Second quarter, Washington State scores 2 touchdowns, tied at halftime, and then Oregon just kind of runs away with it. While Wazoo's offense signed 2 receivers for over 85 yards. Jaden DeLora looked really good, looked pretty decent, I should say, 20 for 36, 208 yards and 2 touchdowns. For Oregon, it was all about the rushing game. Anthony Brown, he didn't look great in the passing game, but he rushed for over 100 yards with a touchdown.
That's kind of, you can just control C, control V that in any game recap for Oregon this year. So
Pretty
nothing really out of the
much.
ordinary there.
Byron Cardwell rushed for 98 yards in just 9 attempts for a couple touchdowns. And Travis Dye rushed for 88 yards in 18 attempts for a touchdown. And of course, both defense sucked, although Oregon got a couple of picks. Any takeaways for you in this game?
This is kind of, like you said, been the standard Oregon performance. Anthony Brown hadn't been great, but he's been able to run the ball. I honestly thought Wazoo looked a lot better than I expected them to, honestly. DeLora looked really good. I mean, I think this is a good performance for them, especially with everything they've had going on this year. It's something they can build off of.
Yeah, I think Washington State, even though they lost this game, they seem to impress everybody else as the season goes on. Because of course, I think they shocked a lot of people when they beat Arizona State. I mean, I was in attendance, and then they go on and have this competitive game against Oregon a week later, and looked like they were going to beat Oregon, which would be beating 2 very high touted Pac-12 schools. So that would have been huge for them, especially while they're trying to. If they had won this game, they would have been competing for the Pac-12 North title.
Yep. Eventually, they're gonna have to start turning some of these into W's, though. You can only have so many moral victories before it starts to become a problem.
Yeah, and speaking of the state of Oregon, finally for football, let's go to Oregon State, who demolished Stanford 35-14. Chase Nolan, in my opinion, he looked more consistent. Defense got a couple picks, allowing just 94 yards, and they face Arizona State next week. I should say, Oregon faces Utah next week, and Wazoo faces U of A next week, just to update you guys. But Oregon State, Stanford, I don't think anybody was surprised by this, although I've lost faith in Oregon State this season.
Yeah, I kind of give up on trying to analyze them and figure out what they've got going on in Corvallis because it just doesn't seem to make sense anymore.
But this was a game that they should have won. Stanford has just looked worse as the season goes on. I don't know how they're still how everybody still tries to think that they can be competitive. I mean, 94 offensive yards is awful.
Somehow they had 14 points though, which I don't know.
Makes no sense to me. Pac-12 makes no sense to me, and I go to school in the Pac-12. So, but let's move on outside the Pac-12 for a little bit. Let's go to men's basketball and talk about Gonzaga, as this week they beat Texas 86-74 in a very good close game, or it was close, as it was a game between two top 5 schools. And then they go to Alcorn State and win 84-57. What have you taken away from these two games?
Texas, I'd say neither of these really surprised me. I think like you said, Chet Holmgren was kind of quiet for the Texas game, but then again, he's a freshman. This Gonzaga team is deep enough that they don't need to expect him to be great every single game. That's why you have Drew Timme, who can drop 37. Heck, Strother is coming off the bench, dropping close to 20. This just kind of cements him as the best team in the nation to seem to be right now.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a lot of people, at least people I go to school with, who say that Gonzaga is is kind of only the consensus number 1 because they are historically good. But I just think this year they're just incredibly deep.
Mm-hmm. I think that's the biggest thing. That's what it comes down to.
Like last week, we were talking about how Drew Timme was a little quiet and Chet Holmgren kind of stood out. And then the opposite happened in the Texas game.
And they're still undefeated.
They're still undefeated. Speaking of undefeated, or I guess they're not undefeated anymore. I thought we were going to Washington State next, but Oregon kind of had this is why I said it was a chaotic week for Pacific Northwest schools, or its teams, I should say. Oregon demolished SMU 86-63, and had 3 players with 18 or more points, and then they lost to they got absolutely demolished by Brigham Young University 81-49. Yikes.
This is one of those results. I mean, we talked about it last week. BYU's probably should have been ranked in this game and most definitely will be come Monday. But I was watching the game broadcast talking about how every year Oregon kind of has one of these games. But by January, they're the 2-3 seed in the Pac-12. Dana Altman has them looking right, and they go on to win the whole thing and then make it to the second weekend of the tournament. Oregon only shot 32% from the field. BYU was over 50 and over 40 from beyond 3. That's really hard to replicate a lot of the time. So I think this is kind of a combination of BYU being insane offensively and Oregon being terrible offensively. If they played a 7-game series, I can't say confidently BYU would win, but they only got 1 game and Oregon did not show up.
The scoreboard doesn't say so, and shooting was it put down 32% from the field.
That's all.
Yikes. But now, speaking of undefeated schools, at least right now, Washington State handles Seattle 79-61. Deshaun Jackson nearly a double-double off the bench, and then they go and beat UC Santa Barbara 73-65. Abogidi 18 points and 8 rebounds. And do you think the 4-0 Cougs should be taken seriously?
Yeah, they've definitely shown signs. I think they can push to be a top five team in the Pac-12, excuse me. I think they're still kind of that tier behind UCLA and Oregon and potentially USC this year. They're definitely showing all the right signs though. You got to beat the teams that you play, as dumb as that sounds. But I thought Seattle was going to be a trap game for them at least, and they was going to be close. But they blew them out. And Santa Barbara's not bad either. You just kind of have to keep winning. I think I'll feel more confident saying that they can be a top 5 team in the league when they actually play another Power 5 opponent. But for now, this is a good way to keep racking up the W's.
Yeah, and the W's are what's important to get to March. And Washington State, at least right now, is doing what they need to do, is being teams they need to beat and at least be competitive against Power 5 schools and top 25 schools.
Mm-hmm.
They do face, who are they facing? They do face, I just lost where I was, Idaho and Winthrop next week. And Winthrop's a team that can kind of surprise you. They've been to March Madness a couple of times the past couple of years. So who knows? That it's really their first, I don't want to say first real opponent because UCSB is very good. But Winthrop can surprise you.
Mm-hmm.
But now we go to Oregon State as, they lose to Iowa State 60-50, terrible shooting. They only went 3 from 22 from deep, and then lose to Tulsa 64-58. This is a team that was that surprised everyone in March Madness last year, and now they can't seem to get a W to save their lives. They are 1-3, but it seems like they can't beat the schools that they need to beat.
Yeah, Iowa State, one of the worst, probably the worst Power 5 program last season. And Oregon State, they're just not good this year. I don't really know of any way to say it. They might end up being the worst team in the Pac-12, but I think they're definitely going to be competing for that spot with the team we're about to talk about next.
Yes, and team we're about to talk about next is we're not going to spend too much on Oregon State. They face Samford and Princeton next week. They're both 2-1. But Washington, they face Texas Southern 72-65, and I believe they faced a team yesterday that I just written down. Washington basketball, they beat Northern Arizona 73-62. And in that game, they were all right, I guess. Not really. 38%, 38.5 from 3, 36.7 from the field, which is lower than NAU 20, who shot 70 or 37% from the field.
Both these teams suck.
You're correct. They should have beat NAU, but they should not have beat them by 9 points.
Yeah.
They face Wyoming today, and they face George Mason on Monday. SD State on Tuesday, Nevada on Wednesday, and then we'll have our show on Friday.
It would not surprise me, honestly, if they. So I have in the show notes, would not be surprising if they go 2-2. But after seeing George Mason beat my Terrapins the other day, and just kind of thinking it over, it would not surprise me if they go 0-4 or 1-3 on this trip. And I think Mike Hopkins will be following Jimmy Lake very closely behind.
Yep. So now it's time for me to go on a hockey rant to kind of sum this up. So the Seattle Kraken, they finally are acting like an expansion team. They lost 4-2 to Minnesota and 4-2 to the Blackhawks. Brandon Tanev, Turbo, is kind of falling back to earth. Jordan Eberle is continuing to score points during this 5-game losing streak. Grubauer is continuing to struggle. He against Minnesota, he was over 900, but against Chicago, he was 893% on save chances. And it's not like the defense is being terrible either. The Blackhawks yesterday, they only had 18 shots on goal. And it was, that's usually a good recipe for success, but not if you're the Seattle Kraken. And I think, it's way too early to say this, but so far the Grubauer signing has not paid off. It is still early in the season and it is still an expansion team. So I don't want to go too hard on them. They are currently on a 5-game losing streak. They do face their next game is against the Avalanche, who they got crushed by last time. In this time in Seattle, they do face a very good Capitals team, and their best case scenario is if they go to overtime, because the Capitals suck in overtime. They face the Carolina Hurricanes on Wednesday, and then we have our show on Friday where they face the Tampa Bay Lightning. So they got a very tough schedule. I would be surprised if they pull off a win against any of these teams. But the Vancouver Canucks fall to Vegas 7-4. Thatcher Demko's second worst performance in a rather solid start to the season. JT Miller and Connor Garland continue to rack up the points. And then their next game against the Ducks, they lost 5-1. Halleck showed his age despite having a .903 save percentage so far this season. Niles Hoglander was the only one with more than 3 shots on goal, and they faced the Avs and the Jets this week. And so the Canucks just do not make any sense to me. They just have just a team that's built is built for to get butts in seats, but not to win games. And it's just so frustrating to follow both of these teams. But the Seattle Kraken, I can give a more leniency to, because they are an expansion team. I think a lot of people expected more from Seattle because of Vegas a few years ago, but that's just an anomaly. The Kraken are acting like an expansion team. Whatever. They could be successful in 3 years and win the cup like the Panthers did. And the Vancouver Canucks are just awful. They're a team that looks like they could be good, but are not good. So that's my hockey rant. Duncan, you have anything to say?
I think you said it pretty well. Kraken kind of it's I remember when they signed Grubauer, I was pretty excited because I don't know a lot about hockey, but he's one of the few names that I do know. And to see him not be as good as he was last year it sucks, because he was kind of the big name that Seattle fans are excited about.
He was a big name I was excited about too, because I'm currently wearing my Ovechkin jersey today. Sorry, I'm a fraud. But it's I saw Grubauer win the cup with Go Capitals, and then it's like, oh cool, they're going to have a former Cap and a former cup winner there, but it just seems like the Kraken just crack under pressure, and it's just like the Kraken will score and then the opponent will immediately score, and it's just hard to watch.
Yeah.
Sorry, it kind of ended on a bad note there, guys, but we will have a show on Friday next week. So cancel all your Black Friday plans. Just, enjoy the show on 7 p.m. on Friday next week in Eastern time, and we'll see you guys then. Bye. Oh, and have a great Thanksgiving.